Welcome to Stack Sessions, the podcast where software engineering meets business strategy. I'm your host, Jeff Keyes. I'm the field CTO at Allstacks. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Danny Presten, an industry expert and industry consultant, and having long time experience working with enterprise software teams. Danny specializes in value stream flow. He's worked in the trenches to operationalize, improve, reduce bottlenecks, and turn real world concepts into reality. So we're going to dive into practical approaches to flow optimization, what it actually means when implementing value stream management at scale, what the impact of AI is, and how teams can look at the adoption of AI and understand what really works. This is Stack Sessions. Let's go. Danny, welcome to this discussion.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I will say you leaned into the word long time, very long. So, definitely starting to feel a little old there. But yeah, it's great to be here for sure.
Understood. Well, I do see a few gray hairs there. I have those myself. So, Danny, I've known you for a while now. Maybe the other people that are listening haven't really heard, but part of your story is coming out of college and getting a passion around manufacturing and how to make improvements. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah. I think that's an important thing. Like it colors my perspective a lot. So I went to Georgia Tech, go Jackets. They're doing decent in football this year. So that's always encouraging. But I struggled with a lot of different, I tried various engineering paths, struggled with a lot of them until I found industrial engineering. And man, that was like immediately got on the dean's list. It was where I needed to be. I kind of understood that stuff. And so I don't see loads of industrial engineers out there working actively in software development, but those principles apply. So industrial engineers primarily are, at least back in the 90s when I was in college, were concerned with improving flow through manufacturing, distribution, logistics networks, that kind of stuff. A lot of lean, Six Sigma principles and practices at play. And so that's where I started. A career was kind of helping improve flow in physical environments. But those skills, so I ended up transitioning to more like soft environment, software delivery, development, that kind of stuff. A lot of those principles, practices applied directly into that. Like you'll see kind of the basis of Agile, that got so popular there throughout the early 2000s. All of those things are based in lean principles, practices, that kind of thing. And so that definitely colors the way I view stuff and kind of provides a little bit more of a backdrop or maybe a lens through which I kind of see modern software development happening.
You bet. Well, then this next question's kind of right up your alley. AI is supposed to be making us all sorts of faster and more efficient. What are you seeing in adoption and the answering some of that question?
Yeah, so there's like an old proverb, old King Solomon guy said, there's nothing new under the sun. And he said that like back in the BCs. And I'm like, well, there's a lot of new stuff under the sun since then. I have a car versus a horse. But I think in principle, what he's getting at is that there's patterns that you can watch and those patterns tend to repeat over and over. And so if you think about manufacturing, producing physical items over and over, there was a big industrial revolution in the early 90s where we figured out assembly lines and specialization and stuff like that. But then there was another wave of significant improvement that happened around the 1950s. The first robot, it was like an arm, was produced that was just basically helping lift heavy things more efficiently. That continued to evolve into the 80s. You get more sophisticated robots. And then now a lot of manufacturing is kind of human monitored, but it's automatically done. And with AI, even those robots are getting smarter and smarter, able to do more skills. But that pattern of we had something that was primarily manual that became more automated or human augmented. It progressed to the point where it's very little human involvement in some manufacturing lines today. It's more just monitoring or fixing broken things. I think you see that pattern that one was spread over decades. I think you see that same pattern occurring now over years. It's a faster thing, but the pattern's repeating. So we went from the 90s, when I was starting my career and developing, basic software things through that. You saw that it's primarily a manual process, like I had to every character and I had to compile it and all that kind of stuff. To today, you're more human augmented. It's getting better. I don't think we've met the promise of what it could be yet, but shoot, things are moving so fast. Maybe in 6 months, it's better even still. And in 2 years, certainly it is. But it's that same kind of pattern that we saw with robots and automation just happening in our development of software. So a lot of big changes there, but we're not to that final state yet. There's still a lot of improvement to be made.
Absolutely. Well, I think target adoption rates for the code suggestions is still it's approaching, the target is approaching 25%, which means 75% of the time, oops, got you started.
Yeah, I was talking with a coworker the other day, and I feel like a lot of times the AI that I'm interacting with communicates to me kind of like my teenager does, where it's like, I can trust you 20% of the time to give me the real answer of what's going on, and probably 20% of the time you're telling me something that's not even remotely close to true. Like, what's going on here? It's kind of that phase, right? That'll change, it'll grow, it's going to get better, but you're right, we're not there yet. I think there's a lot of hype and just kind of shock and surprise at what we could do, but people are realizing, hey, can't quite trust it to the degree that I want to.
Yeah. But the adoption, well, talk about what you're seeing in companies you work with. How's the adoption going? And what are you seeing?
Yeah, yeah. So as a whole, what I see is there's a massive sprawl to just do something with AI. Like I'll hear C-suite just kind of giving edicts like just use it, right? And maybe tracking metrics about how much are you using it, or sending out surveys, and you're trying to understand, are we getting more AI adoption? And I think the premise right now, by and large, has been there's probably something good it does. We don't know what it is. Let's just use it and hope good things happen. It's kind of like a sprinkle approach. That's not bad in a complete, greenfield discovery phase, but I think all those things come with a cost and a price, and a lot of executives have been probably unrealistically assuming like if we just use it, we're naturally going to get better, and they're finding it's not necessarily the case. There was that MIT kind of had that big report they recently released where 95% of generative AI companies pilots are failing. That was a very narrow view of AI. It was looking at just the ability to develop software faster. And like you said, some of the suggestions are not quite there yet, so you didn't get as much return as you thought you might in the pilot. As a whole, I think there's plenty of other places to look at where AI is being used beyond software development that are producing a better return on that. But yeah, I think a lot of companies have kind of said, wow, it didn't meet the promise. And I'm seeing like in trends, like adoption rates are starting to fall here at the back half of 2025 versus where they were going earlier. And it's almost like this, well, we tried that and it didn't work, kind of giving up on it too quick kind of mentality. Like it was supposed to work and it seemed like it would when I was, asking Chat GPT queries on my computer. But the more sophisticated stuff takes more training, and it's going to take a little bit more time to get it where it needs to be. And I think I'm seeing some people kind of just giving up a little bit too soon on that.
Yeah. So you talk about that when you see executives just mandating, just use it. What's some of the hope that they have, the aspiration? What is it that they're really telling their teams? What are they trying to accomplish?
Yeah, yeah. So if you kind of ask, why would we just use it? What are we trying to achieve? I think there's a handful of like fundamental questions that they're trying to answer. And these are not new questions. These are questions that people have been asking, I don't know, since we started making investments, like the dawn of time, right? But I think as a whole, people are really trying to see, like, are we putting our money on the right bets? Are we making the right investments? And we think AI is going to help us better make those investments real, right? Like there's something there, right? Are we putting our money on the right bets? Um, when are we going to get those things done? Like when's that going to be, that new feature that AI is supposed to help us produce? When is that going to get into production? And when do I start generating ROI? And then the third question usually that follows, is it the right stuff? When will it be done? And then usually right after that is, can I get it done faster? So I'm sure it's the right stuff. When will it get done? Can I get it done faster? And so this, if you really drill down to what am I trying to do with AI, that's the fundamental thing. There's I think right now, some of it is like, I just want to stay relevant. I want to be a cool kid. Let me do something. There's some of that happening, but what that fades away real quick, right? Like being the cool kid using AI, that's no longer a bragging point. I don't think even today, like a year and a half ago, it was a bragging point. Like, let me post on LinkedIn, cool stuff I'm doing with AI, but it's ubiquitous now, right? If you're not using it, you're the odd person. And so the cool stuff kind of has that ship sailed, or increasingly is sailing. But now let's get at this. There's a promise of efficiency. Is it the right stuff? When's it going to be done? Can it be done faster? Those questions still remain.
Interesting that you commented that AI adoption rates are actually not just flattening, but declining. Does that mean they're not getting ROI from it? You were talking about they're just giving up too early and trying to discover, are they making the right bets, and are we getting ROI out of this? But what do you see out of that? What are you hearing?
Yeah, to me, it seems like there's still a lot of writhing, like trying to figure out what is the right tool. I mean, new tools crop up almost daily, and so there's still a lot of like, which one should I use? Where's the best return? One org I was working with recently, was all in on Glean, and now they've switched and they're all in on Gemini. There's almost like we're switching so fast we're not able to kind of fully get the benefit of any one. So that's just going to wear people out over time. Like there's only so much change you can absorb, and finally people just settle in, and there's not a growth. It's like a settling in phase. We may be starting to see that, like as the hype begins to wear off, but that's not, it's not like that's going to stay that way forever. I think what happens is you get to, just like with robots in manufacturing, right? Through the 70s, everyone was freaking out like, there's not going to be a place for auto workers anymore and robots are going to take over everything. And then you realize in the 80s, it's like, well, they're very good at these specialized things. And there's still a place where we need humans in the loop. And then you kind of settle in and it's like, okay, here's a growing place where we can use those and continue to increase efficiency and get high quality cars through a manufacturing plant even faster still. I think that same pattern will happen. Like we'll see kind of this hype cycle, man, change everything, everybody do it. Well, it didn't meet our promise, to then a steady growth after that.
Absolutely. How, moving over a bit, how do we actually answer some of those questions of, are we putting our money on the right bets? Is AI helping? How do we know when we're actually improving our return on our investment? And what kind of practices do we do to accelerate that?
So if you're listening to this, and you're like, wow, will I have a place in the world in a mature AI environment? I think if you can answer those questions, there's always going to be a place for those answers to be needed. So like that, are we putting our money on the best bets? That was a great question to have in the 1600s and the 1700s and the 2000s, and, whatever, the year 2050, right? That's not going to change. The way that we can derive that information, like, do I know if it's the right bet? Well, we get new tools all the time to show us that, right? That's going to be where to lean in. But fundamentally, I kind of approach my mentality as I'm helping customers out. It's like, okay, what's the best way I can answer that question right now? And there's loads of tips, tricks, techniques, all that kind of thing. But I do see a big change is our access to information nowadays is a lot greater than it was even 5 years ago, certainly more than 10 years ago. So manufacturing has always been physical, right?
Mhm.
And you can see it. So doing industrial engineering, I could walk into a manufacturing plant, stroll around and get a sense for how things flowed through that plant. And then even bigger than that, I got a sense for where the opportunities were. Hey, there's error on this shelf. We could have a more dense pick area, or wow, here's a big bottleneck. Everything's piling up on workstation number 7, right? And so you could physically walk around, see those things, make some changes, and then physically see how it got better. Really, up until the past 5 years, 3 years, the software was invisible. We couldn't just walk around and see how things flowed. But a lot of tool vendors, Allstacks being one of those, is starting to take that invisible work and make it more visible. So now I can see how code's flowing through my organization. I can start to see where bottlenecks are, how many hands are having to touch that before it finds its way into production, and even how many hands are touching that after it finds its way into production. And so there's a rapid evolution of our ability to take invisible things and make them visible. The question's the same question. Is it the right bet? What's the likelihood that gets to production when? And can I accelerate that? Same three questions, but my
Mhm.
ability to answer that dramatically improved here in the late part of 2025, way better than it was in 2022 or 2023. And I think it'll be even better still at the end of 2026 if we're talking next November then about the same topic.
I'm sure we will be, just from
Stack Sessions is brought to you by All Stacks. You're looking at your project data. Everything seems fine, but what's hiding underneath? Watch this. Instead of hunting through dashboards, just ask. The AI analyzes your entire SDLC in real time. Now, here's where it gets powerful. Deep research agents go deeper. There it is. Hidden delivery risks, surfaced automatically. Specific recommendations, assigned owners, expected impact. Try it for free through January 2026 at allstacks.com.
The funny thing is regardless of the technology, the question of investment never changes. We still have to spend money, people, tools, time to get stuff done. And at the end of the day, we have got to decide, was that worth it? Was it the right bet? Did it achieve the results? In the end of the day, even back in the Agile Manifesto, it's back to producing value faster. Well, has anybody really done a great job in defining value? Is it lines of code? Please. You have to start looking at that from a different perspective. Given your perspective on industrial engineering, you have sort of seen firsthand the robotics making changes for the better of the manufacturing line. What parallels can you draw from the industrial engineering and robotics to AI agents in the software development pipeline?
They're definitely like you can see kind of a natural correlation. If you think of value that we're producing is in the form of a widget that flows through a manufacturing plant and it eventually gets on a shelf and sold, and that that creates value for the company. It's very similar with software lines of code. They get bundled together. They're delivered, not via a truck, but they're put into a customer's hands, some way or other, right? E-commerce site or something, right? And then when that customer decides to use it, they're generating value for the person providing it. So robotics just made that whole process happen with higher quality. It helped increase efficiency and productivity. Robotics, in particular manufacturing, increased worker safety. It took people out of dangerous situations, and maybe not quite as applicable in software unless you're de-risking cybersecurity threats, things like that. But it also gave a lot of flexibility, customization. You have faster feedback cycles in a lot of ways. You can reduce your operational costs, so you can put more money into bigger investments. You could shore up labor gaps. A lot of times in a manufacturing plant, you try to position those in places where you have labor because it required labor. But with robotics, you could begin to not have to worry about that as much. Decision making, all those kind of things played into increasing the value that you would be able to extract from your manufacturing process. I think those are very similar, the same benefits you could expect to see in software as we continue to mature our ability to automate the development of software and the monitoring of
But
that.
Well, and using that same kind of lean manufacturing perspective, I'm sure there's a set of standard metrics that you could look at to evaluate how it's going on the software manufacturing line. You want to talk a bit about those and what they mean?
Yeah, so in real manufacturing, the hard goods, not all this is real, but the hard goods, you're looking at cost per unit. How much does it cost to produce an increment of value? That's the time that it takes to produce that increment of value. That's another big thing. So you're looking at overall end-to-end cycle time and then various cycle times through workstations. And then ultimately you're looking at the ability for that product to sell in productions. I've seen a lot of companies produce hard goods, and it's this is not going to be a surprise, right? Spent a lot of years making something cool, putting it on a shelf that never sold. And so they just, they made an investment, it was the wrong investment, but the feedback's time on that was 5 years and a big investment made on that. So those are things you'd look, is like what's actually the value it's generating once it's on a shelf? What's the time that it took me to get there, and what's the total cost that it took me per unit? I think a lot of those are same things that we would look at. So the whole notion of flow metrics encapsulates that pretty good. Like those are common things you'd see in a manufacturing plant that's just applied in software manufacturing. So we're looking at our flow time. How long does it take to get something done? The flow velocity, how much of this thing are we able to produce over time? The distribution of work, are we making the right bets? Flow metrics don't quite look as far right as once it gets on the shelf. Did I sell it? Like that's going to be more business metrics, but super important. And just between us, I think that's the next big opportunity in our monitoring. We're making great strides in monitoring the manufacture of software. But man, if we can look post-production and see what was the value we extracted from that thing, that'll be an incredibly important insight to have as we continue to. I like to mix those two with experience metrics. So in a manufacturing plant, we want to make sure the people that are working on the line are happy, that they're becoming fully engaged. And I think it's even more important in a knowledge work. So those kind of, how are we doing from a developer experience or employee experience? And then combining that with what is the value we derive from that, I think that makes a pretty powerful combination.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned something that we should double click on here I thought was really interesting. You called it, are we making the right bets? And you referred to flow distribution. Can you talk a bit about that? That's a highly misunderstood kind of metric that I think people should understand more.
Yeah. So flow distribution is not like the laser focus perfect way to answer that question, but it's directionally one of those things that we've got available that's better than nothing, right? So flow distribution, what it's looking at is of the kind of work I'm doing, which categories does it fall in? And so things like this is new feature development, this is security patches, things we're doing to de-risk our system. There's also addressing technical debt, various categories of work like that. So at a macro level, you can kind of think of it in terms almost like a pie chart of where I'm making my investments. How much of it is new feature work? How much is de-risking my systems against, some sort of vulnerability that I don't want to have? How much investment am I making into my systems to ensure that they're going to be stable and fast in the future? Things along that kind of category. How much of it is related to production level defects? Am I spending a lot of time on that? So those are helpful as you're looking at the various products you've got, some of which are mature in industry, some of which are brand new. You would want to look at the distribution of work that I'm putting to those to make sure you're making the wisest investments. So for instance, if I have a product that's about to be sunset, I don't need to be putting a lot of work into new features and tech debt. Let's just fix defects on that and I'll bring my cost down. If I have a brand new product that's just coming to market, well, man, new features needs to be a big investment. If it's not quite there yet, I may not even have many defects. So you would change that investment portfolio based on the life cycle of your product. Again, that's a very coarse idea of where to go. You get a lot better view once you can monitor usage in production and kind of understand where that goes. Did I make the right bet? And use that as a feedback loop into prioritizing the next set of bets that you're making.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's kind of course level view on that.
It's funny, back to a topic you talked about, looking at the investment and looking at the consumption, if you will, of the output of the manufacturing. The investment being, out of all this time, we haven't really had great analysis of what does it cost to build a feature. You would think of that as being the most fundamental question. And yet, as an industry, we kind of suck at it. We know how much people cost. We know overall how much things cost from environments and tools and so forth. That's easy. But the challenge comes down to there's so many fingers in the pie of different people doing different things that it's hard to correlate that back. How much are you hearing people look at that investment question and the value of being able to answer that investment question?
It's definitely been something people have wanted to answer for a long time. And we've had, very rudimentary ways of getting there, like fill out your timesheet on Friday has been the predominant one for 20 years, right? But that's almost like if you were trying to figure out how much does it cost to manufacture a widget, that's almost like all you have is the time clock and the doors are locked to the manufacturing plant. You can't see inside. All you can look at are time cards. You're hoping that that's documented good, but I've done some. I can kind of be a bit of a statistical geek that goes with industrial engineering, but I did a lot of analysis with some companies that allowed me to have their data on time cards, and you can do regression analysis to understand like what are the factors that would play into where time spent. So if you think in terms of some classic waterfall kind of deliveries, you would expect in a design phase, an architect's has a lot of time spent in a an optimization, post-production. The architect's not as involved, right? So I did all this regression trying to figure out, where are the places people spend money. This was like late 90s when time cards were all the thing. And we were like this precise. What it came down, the only significant digit was if you're an FTE, you typically spend 40 hours a week working on something. If you're a CTE, you typically spend 45 hours a week working on something. Like that was it. That was the only factor was FTE or contractor. There was no correlation to phase or size or priority or anything like that statistically in the data, which means people are just putting 888, snowmen on the timesheet every week, right? That's not good data. We were just stuck with, that's all we had through the 90s, through the early 2000s. But now it's totally different, right? We can begin to peer into where are we making our pull requests? What are all the things going in that? And even like there's a lot of tools out there that are aggregating all this together so you can start to get a sense of like calendars to your ALM tool to your source code repository. Like your data set is dramatically bigger today than it was 3 years ago. And so now we can walk into the manufacturing plant and we can walk around and we can pull statistics off the various machinery and begin to understand what is the total cost per unit on that thing. It's a whole new capability that we've got. And it's not, it's not perfect yet, but as fast as things are moving in the next year, it easily could be.
And with one of the things that we do at Allstacks is exactly that, right? And including the R&D capitalization automation. And it's to think that companies still use timesheets that are just filled out on a Friday, and I don't remember what I did, even though they're working on a million different things. That's you don't really see what's going on. You might see that code's getting written, but you don't see the impact of people, and that cognitive overload is what's slowing you down in a big degree. Looking at work in progress is an important metric to evaluate for the team, and just include that in the standard set of flow metrics that you look at for your people that are on that manufacturing line. One last topic. I know we're running at the end of time here. So we talked about agents in the machine itself. How are you seeing AI helping the management layer as you look at overseeing the entire plant itself? What kinds of trends are you seeing there?
Yeah, so the insights that managers would have access to are a lot more rich now, right? We've got a more interconnected ecosystem. There's a significant ability to begin to pull those insights or pull that data together into real insights, and then ultimately drive better decisioning on that. So as a whole, I think all that is significantly improving. I think fundamentally, we're going to see a shift into, instead of people producing artifacts assisted by tools, we're shifting into teams are orchestrating the AI agents to do the work, right? So that's going to be a shift that we will see here, I think, in the coming year or so. It's just moving so fast on that. But it's just a mindset shift. It's I'm not just an IC. I might be an IC that's managing AI to perform a function. Puts us all in that a little bit more of that manager seat than we probably had been in the past.
For sure. And how you manage that team of teams now becomes also different. You can't look at this from the same perspective that you did before. I heard that Microsoft is actually adding logins now for agents as part of their. So get ready. I talked to a CIO, I guess it was a couple weeks ago. Her comment was basically, I want my developers to stop writing code. I don't want them to use tools and manage a group of agents writing code, but I don't want that. I want to get their hands off the keyboard, get them out of doing all that rudimentary stuff. Their value isn't how well they can construct a piece of code. It's going to be how well can they orchestrate across these different agents to produce a result.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't freak out yet because, again, 25% of what those agents are doing is super valuable and 75% is a little sus. That ratio is going to change, and so there'll be a shift, right? Just like in the 1950s, the robot could lift a heavy thing up, so you didn't have to lift the heavy thing up. By the 1980s, the robots, you're basically managing a section of the assembly line, making sure the robots are producing quality work and not breaking down, and optimizing further. What's the next thing we need to do to make this run smoother? It was a shift, right? Went from AI is my assistant and it lifted the heavy thing for me to now I'm managing the robot to do the thing, right? So I think in modern manufacturing, AI robots are a necessity. They're not a nice to have. Like, I don't know how you run a manufacturing plant that doesn't have any robotics in it anymore. I think in a similar way, we look at right now, I feel like a lot of people are like, hey, the AI is just luxury. Look at, it can help me do this one task. In the near future, it becomes a necessity. And that's where I go back to like where we started the conversation, like bragging about your use of AI, super cool 18 months ago. But is increasingly it's like, well, no, duh. Like that's not a bragging point. That's like an expectation. And I think we see that we've seen that with manufacturing and robotics. We'll see that with AI and software development.
So Danny, how If a company is having a particular set of struggles, what kinds of struggles would be a good indicator that maybe they should reach out to Danny Preston?
Man, a number of things. I mean, to me, fundamentally, what I do well is answer those questions. Are you putting your money on the right bets? How are you going to know when you get the ability to start generating ROI on those? And what can you do to accelerate the ability to get that ROI? So if those are concerns, I'd love to talk and have that conversation, especially now that there's so much changing in our world where we're just getting a lot better ability to answer those questions with real data based on your systems. So a lot of good stuff there. But that's man, I wake up every day to solve those problems and it keeps me motivated. It's good.
I love it. And how do they get in touch with you?
Probably the easiest way is just to LinkedIn. So my last name's Preston, Presten. If you see another Preston, I'm probably related to them. But yeah, Danny Preston on LinkedIn. Happy to talk to you there.
Fantastic. Well, what a pleasure. Thanks for spending some time together. This has been a really fun conversation. What's old is new. The same problems and the same questions still exist. We still have to answer the question of, are we putting our money on the best bets? How and when will we get to an ROI? And how do we accelerate that? Great fundamental business questions that everybody should have front of mind, especially as the tooling becomes more expensive, because that's what's happening. And we'll continue this conversation as we go. But thanks for joining us today and listening. My name is Jeff Keyes. Reach out to me at Allstacks or on LinkedIn, Danny on LinkedIn as well. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.